I'll tell you, I've been, since 1961, when I first took mushrooms, under the kind guidance of Tim Leary, I have been, my whole life has been turned around, and I have been pursuing some path. It appears like a path, I experience it as a path, of transformation of consciousness, of awareness, of something, of who I am. Because I saw in that first experience, I wasn't who I thought I was. I wasn't who everybody else thought I was. I wasn't who everybody else, I wasn't even one of the people everybody else thought they were. See, because when I was born, I, like you, went into somebody training. See, you were trained to become somebody. So you have a name, you have an identity. Oh, Doris, she's the one who. You get to develop a role. You go into somebody training, and you go into somebody training because you are surrounded by trainers, all of whom think they are somebody. Your parents definitely thought they were real. Didn't they? Mine did. For the most part, they thought they were real. And they trained me to think I was real. And I was galumphing along being real until the mushrooms. And at the moment of the mushrooms, I saw that I was only relatively real. That who I thought I was only relatively real, and who I turned out to be was much more interesting than who I had thought I was. Which was an incredible surprise, since I thought I was going to spend my life being who I thought I was. Is this too weird? Or, you know, we're on play, let's say. So once I saw that I wasn't who I thought I was, and who I was much better, but I couldn't stay there. I kept coming back into who I thought I was. So I started to look around for how to get into who I really am and stay here. That turned out to be the game. I knew how to get high by all kinds of means, but I didn't know how not to come down. And come down meant come back into my acculturation, come back into my acculturated mind, come back into my conceptual map of reality that was a set of, who knows, electrical, chemical, whatever, habits of thought or whatever, which I will call my ego, for want of a better term. So I would override my ego through spiritual practices, and I would go into a plane of awareness where I was still a separate entity, but I was somehow, it was like coming up out of the smog before the Santa Ana winds. You know, it's like you go into a plane and you go up and suddenly there's sun again. You'd forgotten. And that's what it felt like, coming back into sunlight. And I tried all these methods, and I could get in, but I'd keep drifting back down. No matter how long I tried to stay up there, I would re-enter. I seemed to have karma hanging around that required some attention about my incarnation. So at some point in that process, I began to see my predicament was that I was trying to get high rather than trying to become free. And that high had a polarity in it of low, and that by holding onto the high, I was an entity, but I was somehow, it was like coming up out of the smog before the Santa Ana winds. You know, it's like you go into a plane and you go up and suddenly there's sun again. You'd forgotten. And that's what it felt like, coming back into sunlight. And I tried all these methods, and I could get in, but I'd keep drifting back down. No matter how long I tried to stay up there, I would re-enter. I seemed to have karma hanging around that required some attention about my incarnation. So at some point in that process, I began to see my predicament was that I was trying to get high rather than trying to become free. and that high had a polarity in it of low, and that by holding onto the high, I was in effect pushing away the low. That is, I was pushing away the psychophysical identity that I was born into and that I had thought I was all that time. It's as if once I escaped from the prison cell of my own mind, I didn't want to go back into the cell at all, and I got an aversion to that cell. But by then, I was such a deep practitioner of Buddhism, in which I could understand that the cause of suffering has to do with the clinging of mind, and that the things you cling to are attractions or aversions. And the thing I was clinging to was an aversion of me as a human being. I was busy being holy. So at that point, I turned my efforts around, and I looked at life and realized that I had to embrace my humanity into my being to be free. Is this still, are you with me still, or is it, huh? Because I can simplify it and make it funnier. I think it's pretty funny anyway, but... The first thing I saw when I turned around and looked at life was another of the things that the Buddha had pointed out, but I just saw it without any help from my friends, was the immensity of the suffering. The immensity of the way in which forms were caught in some way that was causing suffering. And I realized that the suffering was so vast, because everywhere I looked, I mean, just to not take off your blinders so you see the underclass in this culture, that you don't hide from the incredible suffering that exists among our family while we galump through life, paying it a certain kind of service, but closing off because the suffering is unbearable. And so we defend, we protect, we do something. We do something to make it possible that we can live with the evening news. In emergency rooms in hospitals, it's like people develop professional warmth. That is, they're emotional in the service of their intellect. They go in and they're being kind to a patient and, oh, hello, dear, how are you? And it seems real. But in a way, they armor their hearts because the amount of suffering that they are surrounded with, they can't bear. Well, I would say to you that we're in this funny predicament, that the suffering that exists in the universe is immense. And that until you can be with that in some way or other inside your being and be open to it, you have no real freedom because you're busy avoiding something. And your ability to free anybody else is quite limited. And when you see that what you'd like to do is take away suffering, you realize that you've got to become an instrument for the removal of that suffering, and that means you have to be free of suffering. And how can you look at that vastness of children dying and people with illnesses and old people being deserted and kids on the street that are frightened and isolated, and how can you look at all that and not close your heart? Because the people in the hospital wards that become professionally warm, unfortunately, it gets so strong that they go home and it hurts their whole life because they can't become unprofessionally warm just at the turn of a martini. And I remembered a funny incident that in India, happened in India in 1971. I was with my guru up in the foothills of the Himalayas with a group of people, And I had a Volkswagen microvan, an old van, and we traveled around India in it. And at that time, there was a tremendous, horrible suffering going on in Bangladesh, which was not just maybe 200-300 miles away. And people were dying. It was a terrible scene, you may remember. And I wanted to go there and take my van as an ambulance. And I went to my guru, and I was very agitated, and I wanted his blessing to do this. And he didn't have a word to say about whether I should or I shouldn't. And in fact, for other reasons, I didn't. But what he saw was my agitation. And he said to me, Ram Dass, don't you see it's all perfect? And when he said that, it was like an obscenity. How could you hear of children dying and with the same consciousness say it's all perfect? It's taken me years to work with whatever that is. And that's part of this process. Because the process is realizing that you and I exist on more than one plane of awareness simultaneously. And that on one plane, suffering stinks. And on another plane, suffering is grace. And the question is, can you balance those two things in your consciousness? Because to the extent you can, you are then capable at looking at suffering and bearing the unbearable. Because who it was that found the unbearable has changed. See, you have a choice when you find things unbearable. You can put up blinders so you don't see the things. In other words, deny the reality out there. Or you can change what's in here. And I would say that we are awakening or being forced to awaken, or the conditions are ripe for awakening, or whatever. And that has to do with recognizing that you exist both as an actor, as a doer, as a body, as a personality, as a storyline. And there is a part of our awareness that is like this absolutely clear, present, just what words you would use? Appreciating the form of the universe, appreciating the play of God, standing in awe of the miracle of it all, whatever. I mean, that wasn't scrunched out in you by the pain of the stuff. Like people say to me, are you happy, Ram Dass? And I look, and I usually say, yes, I am happy, because usually I am. And then somebody will say to me, Ram Dass, are you sad? And I look, I realize, yeah, I am sad. Yeah. Well, how can you be happy and sad? And it's really interesting, because for years I had the model that in order to be happy, I couldn't be sad. And then I see that wisdom is that you are both happy and sad. That you don't have to push away some reality in order to get your rush. That you can be with the universe as it is. How could you live in the moment if you're so busy warding off the reality of what is? What is that you're going to get old and broken down and you're going to die. No matter how good your health treatments are. Now, we may have a genetic breakthrough and then you can just be miserable longer. So when I said to that group I could talk about suffering, death, and aging, to me, that was the grace. That we were finally ready to bring those things out of the closet and to be with them. To be with them, to become what in Yiddish is called a mensch. It's somebody that can look that that you can accept the fact that your heart is breaking all the time. You know, you say, oh, my heart was broken. Well, you notice in most cases it mended. And you went on to love again. What I think the two planes are, for me, which I call, by the way, ego and soul, for want of a better term, and I'm a Buddhist, you got to realize that. Well, I'm actually a Hindu, Jew, Christian, Tao. But you and I, let's play with these two levels, because you and I are meeting here. On one level, you are a woman, a man. You live in a certain place. You have a certain ethnic identity. You have a certain social identity. You have certain roles you fulfill. You're members of certain groups. And that's who you are. And you have come here to the Doubletree, to our temple today, to hang out with me, to come and hear a lecture. And I am a lecturer. Now there's another level at which you and I are fellow awareness. You and I are here just appreciating how the universe is, including our own storyline. In other words, we are souls meeting together to enjoy and appreciate and feel concern for and all the dance of incarnation. We are incarnates and we are also non-incarnates. That is, the soul is not exclusively that which is in your body. In fact, it would be more real to say your body was in your soul, because your body is actually the karmic, how the hell do I know? Your body, from where I'm sitting, in this reality that I'm playing in at this moment, and I'll give you the full treatment, I won't even dress it up for the West. The soul is carrying karma. The soul is the karma carrier. It's like a psychic DNA that's going through, because it's still unique. It's still unique in itself. It's separate. It's still separate from, it's called the Jivatman in Hinduism, as opposed to the Paramatman, which is the one, the God, the pure awareness. And so this soul is carrying the karma, and it works out that karma through dreaming, through manifesting in these various levels of reality, of which one of them is this one. So your incarnation, your body, is the working out of the karma of your soul. Now, if you were in your soul, you would see your karma being worked out. Like I look at the spots on my hand, and the veins and all of this, this is a 65-year-old hand. When I hear the Porcelana ad, it says, they call these aging spots, I call them ugly. Imagine that. Look what it did to my hand. And I look at my hand and I say, they call these ugly, I call them aging spots. And I say, that's a beautiful hand. I can do that because I'm not so invested in this hand. That's my soul awareness. When I went into training to become somebody like you did, I developed an ego structure. And I lived within that ego structure as people lived in Plato's cave or in Gurdjieff's prison cell. And then at some point I awakened just like you have awakened. You don't have to have a big, magnificent, traumatic awakening. You can just awaken because the culture is awakening. And you awaken into the fact that there is more than one reality. And you're starting to awaken out of your somebodyness and even your somebody specialness that you went into training after you trained to be somebody. Aren't you all somebody special? So here we are, busy being somebody special and comparing ourselves to everybody else on every possible dimension. It's fascinating. You go out in the woods to look at trees. You don't say, that pinyon isn't as good as that redwood. You say, a pinyon, a redwood. You see a gnarled tree and you say, look at the beauty of that. You see a straight tree, you say, look at the beauty of that. You come back with humans. You never do that. If she were only a little, if he could only, I like them best when I'm disgusted with that. Instead of, look at that. An absolute essence slimy liar. See, what I'm talking about is cultivating, and you and I meeting in a place of awareness where for a moment we can lay down our righteousness and just be together. We don't have to sit around judging God for a moment. We could just sit around and appreciate what's going on. Just listen to what's going on. I don't mean appreciate meaning, oh, it's wonderful. Forget that. I mean acknowledge, allow, be with what is happening in the universe. Because every time you armor yourself against any of it, in you, out of you, you're dying a little bit. You're being the living dead. You're closing off a certain kind of prana or shakti or energy or freedom or something. Living truth. So you and I meet on two levels. If you look at me on one level, you see somebody dressed in a good-looking shirt. A 65-year-old, decaying, handsome man. And then you shift channels once and you look at me now and you see a speaker. You see a person who was a druggie. You see my psychosocial, blah. You see neurosis. You see all of it. And you're looking at me and you say, there's a neurotic. And I am, just like you are. I mean, my neuroses are my style. I don't know what yours are for you. You need a few neuroses to make life interesting. You just don't have to take them as seriously as we do. My neuroses went from being these huge monsters that would possess me. You know, I'd be galumphing along very holy and clear and light, and along would come one of my neuroses. You know, like lust. I'd hear myself saying, wouldn't you like to come up and see my holy pictures? But then over time, through all these practices, not that I got rid of my neuroses, but I changed who I was in relation to them. So the neuroses became like these little schmoos. That, hello, I haven't seen you in weeks. Come in and have tea. They're like your old friends because you've been so intimately involved with your neuroses, haven't you? Didn't you think they were real and you were real in them and all? And then you awake and you see it's just the neurosis. And now I just think of my neuroses as my style. So you look at me and you see these levels, and then you look once more, just turn the dial once more, and what you see is a fellow soul sitting here, just like you, saying to you, isn't it interesting? Isn't this an interesting trip? How are you enjoying it? And you see yourself as fellow souls who have met to say, well, what's it like what's the incarnation like? How are you doing with it? Can you hear this? Is this too? I look at some of you going like that, I assume. Some of you going like that. Half of the audience thinks the other is psychotic. It's interesting. Interesting predicament to find myself in. See, what I see is that I don't really know what happens after death. I mean, I have lots of models. I mean, I've co-authored a book around the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So, I mean, I've got lots of models from many different traditions about what happens after death. But to me, they're all conceptual models, trying to define or bring back something of something that is not conceptual, that is not something that the thinking mind particularly can embrace. So what I see after death is a mystery. And then I look at suffering, and the thing that any model I have in my mind of justice is offended by the suffering that exists. And then I realize that why that suffering exists is to me still a mystery. And then I ask how I would like to be with a mystery. How do you live with a mystery? How do you live with not knowing? And I realized this a lot in playing with Timothy Leary over the years, and he died, and I did a lot of eulogies, and so I had a chance to really reflect about it. And I realized that one of the ways that he and I delighted with each other in what roles were those of fellow adventurers, playing at the edge of the mystery. It's what scientists feel. It's what artists feel. It's what humans often feel in almost everything they do when they're really awakened enough. Because you see that moment by moment life is the edge of the mystery. And your mind is constantly saying, there's no mystery here. I understand it. I'm now doing the dishes. That's what I'm doing. And reducing it through your mind so you've taken all the mystery out of it to make yourself feel safe. But the fun